You hit the ball out of the park with SPK Sports. You hit the ball out of the park with Scott, Paul, and Kelly. You hit the ball out of the park. Speak Sports.
Hi, I'm Scott.
I'm Paul.
I'm Kelly.
And we're SPK Speak Sports, or we're SPK
Speak.
Sports. Something like that. Anyway, welcome to our show. We're happy to join us. I think our first topic that we're going to touch on today would have to be as I would refer to it, I think Kelly's more positive than I am, the possible baseball season starting in just a couple of days. So who wants to kick that off?
I'll start. I think that this is big, and hopefully it's going to last, because America needs baseball, and America needs normalcy. So I think that's where we're headed. I'm optimistic. I hope that we can get through 60.
You're tugging at my heartstrings, Kelly, but I don't want to throw water on you, but this season is a mess already, and it hasn't even begun yet. America does need baseball. We always need baseball. But starting when we should have already had an all-star game, starting 100 games into a season, it doesn't feel right.
I have my doubts. I'd like to see it get started, but if it gets started and it lasts a week or two or three, that's going to be a mess too. But I hate to side with Paul, Kelly, but there's just too many things. They're not in a bubble. They're going to be going to various cities. Just yesterday, the Toronto Blue Jays are now possibly going to be the Buffalo Blue Jays. They can't play in Toronto, so they're scrambling around for a place to play. That being said, there's also the pandemic rules that are going to have to be followed. Haven't quite read all of the 113-page manual that's out there yet, but one thing I think both guys are the fact that the dugouts are going to be a lot cleaner. There's not going to be any sunflower seeds. There's not going to be any tobacco. There's going to be a lot of paper cups, but not too much else. So that's a good thing. But you're talking about the pitching coach or manager goes out to talk to his pitcher. He's going to have to stay 4 feet away. There's no fans. He's going to have to talk in some type of a voice that the pitcher can hear him, and possibly the runners or the opposing dugout. So there's a lot of things in play there. They're talking about not throwing the ball around with nobody on after an out. Although I also read that the virus can't be spread on objects like a baseball. So, but you can't go to your fingers. You can have a wet rag in the back of your pocket. So I hate to say the word, I don't like this word, but it's the new baseball normal.
Scott, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Are they going to be wearing masks in the dugout?
It's optional.
Optional.
It's optional.
I think everybody should wear them, and you were an umpire, so this brings up a real sticky situation. How do you tell which guy's mouthing off at you from the dugout if everybody's wearing masks?
Or how do you understand what he's saying, So,
that might be a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, some of the guys, my understanding, are going to be in the stands, and so there's enough distancing in the dugout. Some of the subs, but
with the cardboard cutouts.
With the cardboard cutouts. But speaking of masks, the legendary Joe West, who's been around forever, umpire, he has stated that he will not wear a mask. So I don't know how the catcher's going to feel about that. The union hasn't said, the umpire union hasn't said anything one way or the other, and that's just Joe West. It's the Joe West ball game.
Wait, when he's behind the plate, will he be wearing a mask?
Well, maybe that's what he's talking about. Now, there's a man. If that's what he's talking about, not wearing an umpire mask with 100-mile-an-hour fastballs coming at him, my opinion has completely changed.
Of all the umpires, even before this pandemic, he should wear a mask.
And here's the deal. The reason he's still in there is to beat Bruce Fleming's all-time career umpired games record. He's, oddly enough, 59 short of tying and 60 from taking the lead. So if he were to be in every game this year, he would break that record. I want to ask you guys a quick question, though. I was thinking about this. What do you think the overs and unders will be for the home run leaders in each league? What total do you think that'll be, and what do you think the RBIs will be? What are the totals for the home run and RBI leaders for both leagues?
I'm going to say 27.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think Mike Trout will be one of them. We're in the 27.
Is that both leagues combined?
27 and 60 games.
That's a lot of dingers.
You're talking about over
That's-
60 home runs in a 160 game season.
Well, yeah.
You want to
It's
phone
true.
a friend?
Hey,
Okay.
you never know, right?
What about you, Paul?
Well, since I'm not real confident that there will be a full season or a full 60
Well, let's say
game
there's
season.
a 60
Okay.
game season.
Okay, then I would say probably more like 19.
Okay. What about RBIs?
I'd say about 75.
Really?
Wow.
You're talking 60 games,
Yeah,
Kelly.
yeah,
Okay. 27 and 75.
right.
Kelly knows something we don't know.
Yeah.
I'm saying 56.
56. I've got 18 and 49. That's what I've got. And I'm just going by, 60 games is, what percentage? 40%? Something like that. So,
We'll
anyway.
see. Yeah.
So, want to move on to something else? Albert Pujols. He's got 2 years left. Well, he didn't have 2. He's got 1 in 60 games
Yeah.
left. A great guy, good ball player, does a lot for charity, but there's nothing left in the tank. Although he didn't have a bad year last year, and he could surprise us. He could hit 27 home runs and have 75 RBIs, Kelly, because this year, instead of the marathon we're always talking about, this is now a sprint. So, but he's getting paid 29 mil prorated this year, 30 mil next year. I obviously he still enjoys playing the game.
Mhm.
Is he being a team player by not retiring and giving the Angels an opportunity to get other ball players for the money they'd be paying him?
Well, he's not going to walk away from that money. So he's entitled to it. You had an owner that signed him. It was a bad deal. So I don't blame Albert for playing.
No.
So I think he has a no trade. And if somehow Artie can call the Cardinals, tell them, hey, you take them for the last year and see if they can work out a deal. They'll have to pay most of it. And let him do his thing with the Cardinals, because that's where he did most of his damage. That's what's going to get him in the Hall of Fame for what he did for the first 10 years.
Right.
Certainly, he's not a Hall of Fame player for the last 10 years that he's played.
Well, Kill, I was not with you on the season itself or on the overs and unders for home runs, but I'm with you 100% on Pujols. He belongs in St. Louis, and it would be a great thing for baseball. It would bring people back to watching it, because I don't think a lot of people will be watching it with cardboard cutouts in the stands.
That's true.
Yeah, that is a great idea. Whenever I was watching an All-Star game back in the old-timey days, I wanted to see the guys that have been around for 10 or 15 years, even if they were on the downside of their career. I'd like to see an Albert Pujols in next year's All-Star game. They always are talking about, there's 28 first-year All-Stars. I want to see the guys that have been around for 15 or 18, like Cal Ripken his last year. So Pujols in a Cardinals uniform for an All-Star game would be great.
Yeah.
I think if the Angels, and they've done that before with Josh Hamilton, they were paying another team the last year or two for him, but I think this would be a great thing for Pujols. It kind of might even revive his career for one last season. So.
I wonder if he would. I wonder if he'd go for it. He's got a lot of things going on in Anaheim.
We'll probably never find out in a perfect world, but you never know.
Where would you rather play during the summer, Anaheim or St. Louis?
In August.
I think Albert might want, at 40 years old, to just
Right.
stick around Anaheim.
Well, does he want to get to another World Series? I'd go with St. Louis.
Exactly.
And I'm an Angel fan.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that'll happen. Who knows? What do you got, Paul?
Well, I've got my problems with the shift. It's been a raspberry seed in my wisdom tooth for ever since they started doing this thing. It looks like softball, or really old-timey baseball, long before any of us were born. And there's just such an easy way to kill the shift, and nobody will do it. It's the bunt. Why doesn't anybody bunt?
Well, I think most players don't know how, and they're not asked to. That's not how they make their money.
I miss the bunt. The bunt brings so much more to the game. The defensive skills to defend the bunt. Back when I was playing, and yeah, I don't want this to be totally nostalgic, but every practice was the first 15 to 20 minutes was pitcher's fielding practice, and it was all about the bunt. How do you cover in different situations, and what types of bunts? The sacrifice, the safety valve, the suicide squeeze, with runners on first and second, runner just on first. The bunt's a great part of the game that fans today are just missing out on because these guys just want to hit the long ball.
Well, as far as the shift, that the shift, they had it back even when the Red Sox outfielder
Ted
Williams, and he would try to hit through it.
Because he was Ted Williams.
Yeah, because he was Ted Williams. Even though the left field, the Green Monster, he could have just. But so I can remember as a kid, Willie McCovey, they put the shift on for the real pull hitters, Stargell, and all that. But now there was some talk about them instituting a rule where you can't shift. Did you hear that?
I don't think you should prohibit it, but I think that teams are doing themselves a disservice, their fans a disservice, by not just exploiting the shift with the bunt. I grew up a Dodger fan, and one of the things I loved about Steve Garvey is that guy got 46 bunts for base hits in his career. And for a guy who hit, typically 20 to 30 home runs and had 100 RBIs year after year after year, today that would be considered an amazing sacrifice because he probably had, home run incentives built into the contract.
Right.
But a sacrifice isn't always just the sacrifice bunt where you're thrown out. It can also be, give up the stats, the personal stats, and for that matter, with the shift, you can probably get a bunt double.
Yeah, and guys don't drag bunt anymore. That was an art. Carrillo used to do that.
Well, if the DH is going to be used, which it will be this year universally,
you'll see even less.
If they have it starting next year for both leagues, which I've always thought, what are we doing with one? Either have it for both or don't have it for either. You're going to see less bunting because you're not going to have any pitchers coming up to hit. But back in the day, again, when the Dodgers and Maury Wills and they were bunting and stealing, and I believe I remember that at Dodger Stadium they would build up the dirt from the infield grass to the foul line a little bit. They would curve it up, so if there was anything close to the foul line, it would stay fair. Conversely, when they played at Candlestick, they would wet it down the infield like there were alligators in the infield, so that Wills and those guys and Willie Davis couldn't steal. So all of that kind of back and forth was going on. But it's a whole different aspect of the game. And you're right, if guys would bunt, and you see it every once in a while, bunt down third base and easy hit if they did it all the time. But they probably don't think they're going to be able to bunt. And the other thing is, with one of the new pandemic rules for the if they go into extra innings, you got a guy on second base. I'd like to see a guy on second base starting the 11th inning. Let's see if we can get it done in 10. But if they've got a guy on second base and nobody out, for me, I don't want to see an automatic bunt. I want to see you try and get the guy in with 3 batters or 4 batters if somebody bunts.
I just don't like changing the rules like that. That's too much like football, college football, where you play 4 quarters, you get into overtime, and you get the ball on the third 25-yard line, and then it becomes really kind of a field goal thing.
Some of this, though, is just because we're guys of a certain age and we grew up with the game the way it has always been.
Right.
For us, has always
right.
been. But there have been some pretty major rule changes throughout the years.
Yeah, well.
Back in the early days of baseball, guys like this. This is Cornelius. Corny would actually ask the umpire, "I want the pitch up here," or "I want the pitch down here," and the umpire would instruct the pitcher where to throw the ball. And it was that way until like 6 or 7 years into professional baseball.
Well, I remember Reggie Jackson doing that at the World Series to Bob Welsh. When Bob Welsh sent him to the ground, he
You're
came
killing
back
me.
and he told him right here, right here. So then Welsh threw it there and he struck out. But, you know, the next time during the series, I think he got Welsh and hit one off of him.
Talking about back in that day, 100 plus years ago, and the umpires were revered back then. It's like you didn't, you know, he was like, you know, a semi-god almost. You know, you didn't give him any flack.
That's the way they treated you when you were.
Oh, all the time.
Right.
Pitch it hither, I'll hit it yon.
All right, let's go on to. We were watching something on TV the other day. Backstory it was called about Shoeless Joe and Pete Rose and the Hall of Fame, and you know, obviously they didn't. They just missed interviewing Shoeless Joe, but they did have Rose on tape, and you know, he's talking about, well, what's worse, you know, gambling on your team to win, or fixing the World Series to lose, and also. And this has been back and forth for so many years, but especially now that gambling is really in bed legally with Major League Baseball in all sports. So if that's the case, that Pete Rose bet on his team to win, is that worse than throwing the World Series in 1919? Is it? And now you got everybody gambling or gaming. It's not really gambling. You're not losing money. You're just gaming. So what do you guys think about
I
letting
think,
him in?
According to that show, I think Shoeless Joe was just about to get in. The tide was turning for him, and then the Pete Rose thing happened, and that kind of put that on the shelf. So
Yeah.
the Pete Rose incident set Shoeless Joe Jackson back. That, you know, so I think it was getting time. You know, people were thinking, okay, Shoeless Joe, they kind of got a raw deal, really didn't get to defend himself, and it looked like he was possibly they were gonna make him part of the Hall of Fame, and then the Pete Rose thing happened.
I think they both belong in the Hall.
I do too.
I have no problem distinguishing Major League Baseball from Cooperstown, from
Right.
the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
Yes, Pete, you're banned from baseball. You're not going to be a manager. You're not going to be
Coach.
paid by any team.
Yeah.
But look at what you did for your career. Nobody's ever done what he
Right.
did. He belongs in the Hall of Fame, and it's a joke not to have him there. And Shoeless Joe, you know, everybody knows, yes, he had the best stats in that series. Did he or didn't he? Some iffy at-bats in the first part of the series, but, you know, even Ted Williams had iffy at-bats.
Right.
So, you know, I think that they both belong in the Hall. Obviously, Shoeless Joe, it doesn't matter if he's banned from baseball or not,
Right.
because he's dead.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody maximized their talent more than Pete Rose did.
Absolutely.
He didn't have the best talent. He wasn't a Mike Trout, but he maximized, and he was one of the most fierce competitors. There's a guy. Most guys like that probably end up with 1,500 hits, maybe 2,000 hits, but certainly not over 4,000 hits. So I tend to agree with you at this point in time.
You know, he played just about every position.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
played second, he played third for years. He even moved to third, I think, when they had the outfield of Foster, Dreesen, and Griffey. And they moved him from left field. He came up as a second baseman, I think.
Yeah, and he played first and third late in his career.
Yeah. So, I mean, the guy was talented.
Never liked him. Never liked him a bit. I was a Dodger fan, and he was part of the Big Red Machine. But he belongs in the Hall.
Yeah.
And poor Shoeless Joe, I mean, he signed his name with an X. So, you know, you got to feel kind of sorry for him. Real quick before you get to your point, speaking of autographs, so with an X, you know, it's Joe Jackson. I want you guys during the week to take a look at, watching at home, at autographs today. Holy mackerel. I mean, I wouldn't buy a picture myself with an autograph because I don't know that it's legit. Mm-hmm. But these were from the Hall of Fame that I saw the other day. Derek Jeter, love Derek Jeter. There's no talk about a guy who, you know, played the game hard all the time. You can't read his name And I saw Aaron Judge and Anthony Rizzo. Why are you going to pay $200 for me to show you this, and you go, oh, that's great, who is it? As opposed to a Ted Williams. Mickey Mantle wasn't any kind of genius as far as brain cells, but he also went to school when they taught you how to read and write, to print.
Cursive, yeah.
And he had a great, the MM on Mickey Mantle was great. Roger Maris, I saw one, Al Kaline, you could read his name, but these guys today, I've seen Michael Jordan's signature. It's just a scribble.
But you can take the ball into the pharmacy and get fentanyl.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I understand if people are begging for your autograph at the ballpark, it's not easy to sign a baseball. But these are for the Hall of Fame. So I'm sure they were at the Hall of Fame or something, and here's your... and you... that's it. So anyway, next.
You want to talk about predictions or...
Yeah.
The season? Let's put a prediction out there.
Well, I'm saying it's the Los Angeles Dodgers, all the way.
And you?
I don't know if the Dodgers will win it, but I think it'll be the Dodgers and the Yankees. Although Aaron Judge still isn't healthy, and who's the pitcher they lost? Severino.
Yeah.
All year, so
yeah.
they're not a lock. But I think they got enough talent. Plus, they always seem to bring up guys or get trades. And like last year, how many guys do they have on the IL?
Right.
And I think it'll be the Yankees and the Dodgers as far as picking it. I would think that the Dodgers, and there's another one, Cody Bellinger, bad autograph. Work on that. Okay.
Yeah, I would. In a normal season, I think the Yankees and Houston, but it's 60 games. Sometimes these teams take a little while to ramp up. Even the best teams, they're not going to get a chance to do that if they get off to a slow start. I'm not saying they will, but I'm going to pick Minnesota and Atlanta.
Wow.
And watch the Reds with their starting pitchers.
Yeah, that's possible.
They-
And the
they've done some good
Nationals
things.
last year, I think after 60 games, were 600-500. So yeah, if you get off to a good start.
So you get good starting pitching.
Yeah.
That can carry you. Usually these bad teams, they get in there and people say, well, they're going to fold in the second half, and they do. They peak early, and then that's it. You don't hear from them. So it's hard to tell with 60 games.
I have some predictions that are absolute locks. No 20-game winners. No 30-30 guys. And nobody draws 100,000 fans.
Yeah.
That's one thing I was going to say with our overs and unders for RBIs and home runs. There won't be anybody that'll have a winning pitcher, a pitcher on their team in double figures. Nobody will get 10 or more. Anyway, speaking of Mike Trout.
Okay, this is a tough room in which to do this. I got angel memorabilia all around me, including my two partners here. And but I want to just ask the question, is it possible that Mike Trout is not the best player in baseball? And the GOAT talk is always there too with Trout. He's a gifted player. My gosh, I love Mike Trout. I have personal reasons for loving Mike Trout, but there's always somebody coming along.
True.
And you got guys like Gavin Lux with the Dodgers. He's the number 2 prospect, right? And he had he showed signs of brilliance last year. Who knows? There are in every era you have guys coming up. I saw an
Acuna from Atlanta.
I saw an interview with Ted Williams recently, and he said, without batting an eye, that Babe Ruth was the best player who ever lived. People who saw both Josh Gibson and Babe Ruth called Josh Gibson the Black Babe Ruth, but some people who saw them both called Babe Ruth the White Josh Gibson. It's really hard when you're talking about GOAT. It's really hard. To distinguish from era to era. You have dead ball, live ball, you have the high mound, the low mound, you have different travel and the number of miles that these guys are putting in.
Right.
It's just impossible. And even within one guy's career, there are other guys coming along.
That's true.
Looking to knock you off.
And I don't forget Mike Trout's teammate, Ohtani.
Ohtani.
It's a big if because he's been hurt. He's had Tommy John. He had a knee problem. But if he stays healthy, he will be the best player in the game.
Ohtani's
he
on.
is unbelievable.
And it could be somebody none of us
Yeah,
have really
yeah.
ever heard of or at least seen. It could
Right.
be, this.
Soto's good from Washington.
There's an Austin Martin who played at Vanderbilt as a shortstop. He was a first rounder, and
Yeah.
I hear he's just a spectacular player. The number one, there are probably 5 guys who are among the top prospects. Who could be that guy?
Right.
Well, I think Trout's pretty much done, and they need to trade him to St. Louis along with Pujols in a package deal
Yeah.
and wrap it up that way.
Yeah.
Quick story, Vin Scully. And interesting for me, I'm watching the Dodgers, and Vinny's introducing up David Freese, who's playing for the Dodgers at the time, and I go, I wonder if Vinny's going to talk about Gene or George Freese, who were 2 minor league ball players decades before. And sure enough, Vin Scully, as only he can, weaves this story about George Freese. And the story is, anytime Vin Scully starts talking about somebody, nobody will ever make the third out until he's done. And so he's talking about George Freese years after he retired. He's playing in Palm Springs, a golf tournament. And he plays in the one day, and he goes, and I guess like to have a few drinks, and he's had a few more than a few drinks, gets back to the hotel room, picks up the phone, talks to the lady for the wake-up call, and he says, yes, I'd like to leave a wake-up call for 7 a.m. And the lady says, you just missed it.
Hi-yo!
Oh,
Anyway, we thank you for joining us today on SPK Speak Sports. I'm Scott.
I'm Paul.
I'm Kelly.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time.